I'm really proud to say that there is the collaboration with the business development group. Dahil even before I came here, they already had good working relationships with a lot of the companies here who advertise with us. And if, let's say, they had a willing boss who would like to speak on our show, then that would be one source of boss interviews. But a lot of them are also coming from my own sources. If I would interview perhaps let's say for instance the GE boss of the Philippines. Since he totally enjoyed my interview on Market Edge, when I approached his bigger boss, John Rice, who came all the way from Hong Kong for the APEC summit, okay kaagad, sige, John Rice on the show. And then when I wanted to ask now for Jack Welch, sige din, they helped me actually get in touch with the secretary, Mr. Welch himself, because we wanted to bring him here for a forum. So I think it's also by word of mouth and also goodwill. In every interview done, I want to make sure that they're happy with the interview. Not necessarily that I ask questions that they like, because I also want to ask, and this is the crux of every interview I do, about the most controversial issues facing them. They'll never get away from that. So if they agree to an interview with me, ako na mismo nagsasabi, salamat na marami kasi alam na nilang tatanungin ko sila nun. And also we RJ Bistro, gitara. Yung mga ano sabi niya, Kati, pretenders, naabutan mo pa? Ay, hindi po sir, pero parang a wave of bosses that who want to be interviewed, whom we want to interview. It goes both ways. And I'm confident that they're not only coming from the traditional roster of bosses, but from those that are powering our economy, those who are techpreneurs, the entrepreneurs who've suddenly found the courage to set up their own businesses. So you get a mix of the oldies and the really young ones. And it's really a nice mix. Every week we try to juxtapose that. There's the big level CEOs and the ones who are just starting out, inspiring others to do business as well.
Thank you. And the gentleman over here, what do you think can you contribute most to the program, and what do you think was the most difficult part of hosting it?
Well, we've just finished 3 episodes, so it's still evolving. But basically, I was interested in doing the show because I wanted to contribute content. There's a lot of researches that are being done in academia. I've done a lot of it. And you do need to combine both sound bites as well as substance. The other thing is, I've helped run a lot of civil servants that you should not support a candidate and then you can be taken out of your job. And yet they allow the cabinet members to openly campaign. I think that's fundamentally wrong. I've helped run elections in the US. They have a very simple system in the United States. When the campaign period starts, you can file a leave of absence without pay. Be part of a campaign, and after the campaign, go back to your job without any loss of seniority, without any loss of your position. So the only thing you have to do is to declare, I'm going to help run the campaign of this candidate. I'm resigning from or I'm taking a leave of absence from my position to run the campaign. Because if what we're afraid of is government executives using the resources of government in a partisan way during campaigns, then let them take a leave of absence so they cannot use government resources. I think we never run out of the situation of election.
That read. After you get the kind of service from Flow and Smart, these guys are making money hand over fist, and they just don't care about service. We ask for so little, and these animals just enough. That's why I noticed that the executives of these telcos are never interviewed anymore because they know better. If they ever show their faces on TV again, they will be torn to pieces. But that aside, my best thesis, I think, on territorial has always been the kinder side of human nature. I think if I were to say, what's the best territorial you ever did? It would be about the young autistic girl who picked up a hamburger and kissed it and said, oh look, it's hurt because her father had bitten into it. And that's the sort of thing that I said, it's cases like that where heaven touches earth. That's what I wish I could report on that. And then suddenly, you see Globe and Smart. You're forced to be that. Who wants to be like that? Well, definitely on the air we won't be like that. And in fact, what seems like criticism, when we've had long experience in campaigns, is actually our attempt to help the candidates. All of the candidates are friends. We know that. And you can see them destroying themselves in some of the most boring ads you can imagine. It's Mar Rojas dancing with three muscular men. Why would he do that? You know? I don't get it. And so we try to say, please, not this. Hoping they'll listen to us and then improve so that their message can come across. I'm sure each of them has something good to say. It's just that they don't know how to say it. I don't know why.
So there's no directive from ABS
No, I think they're
to
probably...
just tone down your.
No, not at all, not at all. In fact, I'm probably disappointed that I don't insult, but then as I said, you do that, this is what I learned as a guest host with different friends. You put down your guest, you put down whether he's there actually or he's, they'll never appear in your show again. And that's the end, because the guest is the show, not the host.
Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. We have a main objective when you have already biases to your guest. Kasi di ba may mga opinion naman na kayo before. When you do your research, you have your maybe opinion on them.
Well, but I handle that the same way I handle being an editor in the Globe and Today. And I learned this during after EDSA. Just to give a concrete example. To me, one of the heroes of that revolution was Joe Concepcion. And he happens to be a rich man. He happens to be a businessman. But nobody knows that from 1971, he stuck his neck out for Filipino freedom. And he's just a funny guy, right? He's fat and he's jolly, but this guy kept sticking his neck out and risking his life and property. Then he became Secretary of Trade, and everybody said, he just broke because he's using the company, he's using his position, but he never did. So I don't believe it. I said, if a public official does something wrong, never form a bias against this person, only against what he did, so that one day I would have a strong editorial against him, calling him SOB or whatever, and the next day he does something really good and I'll praise him to the high heavens. Because you should never give out the news based on his personality. You don't need to judge a person, but you judge him by his actions. Actions are bad, hate him. His actions are good, for God's sakes, praise him, because then he'll be encouraged to do it again.
I think what you do is make sure when you do analysis, it's based on an objective assessment. Must be based on data, must be based on correct news reports, must validate with the candidates what they're saying. In the end, elections come and go, but friendships remain. I've run enough campaigns to know that you might really dislike each other in the heat of the campaign. You lose a lot of friends in the heat of the campaign, especially friends who are extremely agitated one or for another candidate. But after that, you see each other, you have coffee, you make jokes at each other's candidates, and you continue. I think what takes you or what makes you last long in doing political consultancy is the perception of the candidates that you can disagree with them, you can criticize them, but it's never the person. It's never a question of character of the person. It's always what they do. And after that, I've had the good fortune of being associated with candidates from both sides of the political fence. And the ones who ask for my advice come from both sides of the political fence. So I suppose they see me as objective.
If I could just share, I had an interview with Sid Consungi. Yan yung Torre de Manila. Coming into the interview, I make my own questions there. I gather up all the research. I get my producer's viewpoints as well. But how was I to ask it? How was I to ask and not agitate him for the next 20 minutes? And I think in relation to your question about biases, I wanted to get it out first. So in that interview, I put up Torre de Manila somewhere at the top of the interview and injected in there the family's thinking of Torre de Manila. And in there, it's sub judice pa, no? It's a Supreme Court pass, so he couldn't give a definitive answer, but he did share something we never knew before of what his dad thought. And I think going forward, if I were faced with these kinds of issues, with CEOs who had issues and they agreed to have a chat with me, I want to get it out of the way first, rather than talk about it later on. Because I think it makes the chat easier. Because in the end, it's really not confrontational. They are the heroes, as what Debbie was saying. No, they're the stars of the show. It's not the one doing the interview. It's just mere facilitation. So that's my thinking. That's what came to mind when you asked that question.
Thank you. Based on the interviews you had with the bosses, what do you think are they looking for the next boss in the Philippines?
That's a really good question, because when I ask them my final few questions, no, it always is, what to you is a boss? And then they start describing what a boss is and who they look up to. But it sort of also becomes a question that probably gives out a rhetorical answer, because and this happened during my interview with Art Tan of IMI, the Ayala Corp, then IMI. It's a semiconductor company. I asked him, who do you look up to? Of course, he said Jaza and Fernando Zubel, because they are his bosses. But at home now, it is his wife. So you get those, kinds of responses that's really quite interesting. But I think the bosses want to get out there a message that they're confident about the country, that no one else will talk good about our country except the ones who have a stake in it. And they do have a stake in the Philippines. And not only that, they're going global. The next stage and the biggest companies here are the ones who travel the most. They're the ones I see in the airline lounges. It's like, oh, Mr. Aboites, you're here again. And suddenly, oh yeah, they're the ones who are growing the country because they do a lot of traveling, they're connecting. It's an interconnected world, the Ayalas as well. They're the big guys. But one of the biggest discoveries I found in my reporting here so far, as I came back in August, is that there's a budding trend of entrepreneurship among the young, the millennials. And this is, I think, where the next stage of growth will come from. And I think policy should align to help these folks get the funding they need, because the banks don't really lend to them as easily. And I think that is where media can come in to support them and show what a good story is about and encourage others and the banks to support them.
And follow up lang, kasi sabi ni Pinoy, yung boss is the masa. How are you going to translate your program to the quote-unquote real boss, which is the majority of the Filipino people?
Yung ibig niyo sabihin yung
Sa
next na
masa.
sinong magiging boss sa May.
Kung paano niyo po ita-translate yung isa-send yung message ng program niyo across dun sa mga sinasabi ni Pinoy na the real boss of the Philippines, which is the masa.
I see. Well, I don't think this answers your question, no? But in my interviews as well, I dig deep into their advocacies. And I have found that they actually have advocacies that we never knew about. Yung isa nga lang, yung gumagawa ng Happy Toothpaste. I was supposed to have a chat with him today, but because of this forum, I had to move it. But I had a chat with him and he said, I am supporting the deaf. I never knew that. That is so wonderful. And I said, can I visit your factory? I want to see how your toothpaste is made. He said, sure, but you won't hear anyone talk. Why, sir? Lahat po sila deaf, wala nag-aaway. And I would love to capture that on TV. And I think it's in their advocacies where you can actually capture the boss's true heart, no? That they want to earn money, yes, but in the end, they also want to help others. But here's one more thing, it's not an advocacy, it's actually to make profit from an advocacy. Yan ang trend na nakikita ko ngayon. When I talk to Ayala, yung kanyang social advocacy nagiging for profit, na hindi siya nagiging burden sa conglomerate. Just like Fred Ayala of Ayala Education, they're in it to make money and they're not ashamed of it because ayaw nila maging pabigat sa conglomerate. And this is a growing, I think, segment of the conglomerates here that they're trying to do good and earn from it. So, in response to your questions, paano makaka-relate ang masa? I think this is it. Na nakikita nilang sila ay napakalaki at napakalakas pero tumutulong sa karamihan. But it's still in its growth stage. So, medyo siguro down the line pa pero nandiyan na yung infrastructure. Nasagot ko ba?
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ay, last na lang. Kasi I think among us here, kayo po yung may mas nakakakilala or have that opportunity to get to know the candidates itself. Will you be vocal kung sino yung susuportahan nyo considering yung mga programs din kayo?
I'm not supporting any candidate. It's part of my commitment when I joined the program. I do advise some of the presidential candidates when they ask for advice, but I am not part of any campaign. I'm not in the. There's an ethical part of it. If you're part of the campaign and you have a direct hand in running the day-to-day activities of the campaign, to me, you shouldn't be doing any political analysis during the campaign. Because there's an inherent bias and there are opportunities for you to push for your candidate, and go after the other candidates. But if you're doing advisory capacity to any of the candidates based on issues that you hold dear to your heart, to me that is perfectly okay. I'm an academic. I do have some competence on some issues. And I have advocacies for higher education, for agriculture. So most of the presidential candidates at one point or the other had asked for briefing notes on specific issues. And I do that, but I'm not part of any campaign.
So, ano pa, if I ask you offline and ask you, sino kaya feeling mo yung iboboto ko, will you answer me?
Maaga pa eh. People's minds are going to change between now and election day. It's very, very fluid.
Okay.
Well, when we were asked to sign when you're ABS-CBN and doing the news, you have to sign if you have any bias, and I said, does this count? I hate everybody. And also, I like everybody. But yeah, mostly I hate everybody, but I like everybody. I like George Urbina because he wants to get rid of the income tax. That's really something. It's about time we did that. Tama ka. The real boss is your consumer in business. That's your boss. But guess who's the consumer of the guy who's in Malacanang? Us, because every year we pay him to do a good job. That's what he's supposed to do. Taxpayer. I like Duterte because I think he'll certainly liquidate the crime, the criminality. That, as a lawyer, I cannot say that. As a philosopher, I studied. But as a human being, read. Sometimes you gotta do it. And the amount of criminality under this guy, Noy, is unbelievable. I understand from Chinatown that the kidnapping now is retail to the extent it's 50,000 pesos to ransom. You say, oh, cheap. Something can hit everybody already. The problem is this. Okay, maybe it will take you 24 hours or 48 hours to raise 50,000. In those 48 hours, you don't know if your son will die. Can you imagine? That's the government. Yeah, so you say, okay, I also like Duterte. I like race because I don't like anybody being questioned. I don't like an orphan being questioned on her citizenship. I mean, unless your mother gave birth in Luneta and opened her legs for the public to see you come out, nobody knows how any of us was born. Nobody saw me born because my mother was too modest to open her legs. So I don't know about the people who are objecting to graceful and their mothers. Maybe they did it in the open. But most people, most Filipinos are too modest to show how they were born. And there is Miriam. Well, Miriam, I really admire her for her wit. I remember she said when she was elected in 1992, she would shoot all the customs officials, and I thought, well, I finally got her. So I interviewed her for my newspaper, and I said, so what do you mean? When you're elected, you're going to shoot them? And she said to me, Jesus, Teddy, what lousy law school did you go to? No president can shoot anybody. That kind of wit I appreciate. Who is that? Mar Rojas is a guy that's a good friend. I'll tell you one thing about him. This is a man who has no conception of money and personal wealth. He cannot understand money for himself. And that, I thought, that's a quality I want to see in a president. Somebody who won't steal, who won't help. And the other thing about him is, oh, he's a rich guy, so he'll be pro-business. I think you better ask businessmen who have dealt with Ma. wow, that guy doesn't like your idea, he doesn't care who you are. You put your Jaime Sobel, he looks at it, at your paper, and says, in front of you, garbage can. So each one has his qualities. And Man and I were together after he was defeated. I saw him in New York, and he said, "Come, let's have dinner because I'm going home with Corina." It was July. I said, "Why would you do that? Why would you go home? You're a Filipino." What does that mean? Why would you Filipino? Well, you know, the Philippines, right? You lose an election and you go home and what do your friends tell you? Paano nangyari yun? Bobo na talaga, taro ka pa, yaman-yaman mo. I said, no, stay with me and I'll keep you company. Stay together till Christmas. There's a good side and a bad side. What I don't like about him is, I don't know why, he's very hard to change his mind about anything. That's the one thing you have to understand about. You better pray that when he's president, he's right. Because you'll never convince him to change his mind. Well, you try. Yeah? That's really, if you like it, but it's up to you how you like it. Any victims?
Nagkaroon ako ng soul searching, no? Kasi nung coverage namin nung February 25, ito yung EDSA 30, we covered it on Market Edge. That's a business program, but I said to the team, no, we have to cover this as if it were happening, and it happened right there in front of us. Political story unfolding, a historic one at that, 30 years. Let's put an economic overlay over it, business overlay. So we got Ramon Del Rosario Jr. to speak to us. Jocon, he's actually staying at home already. So si Mimi Ong went to his home to make him recount the days of Marcoses, no? And doon ko nakita na this was one day where nobody wanted martial law again. And we have candidates who probably will want that. And I said, paano to? One-sided. I mean, okay, February 25, but let's put some balance to it. And I'm so proud of my team because by the time it was the 10 p.m. show, we were able to present both sides. Platforms, not personalities. Platforms. Demokrasya, ano ang mga naging maganda? Martial law, ano naging maganda? Ang na-mention ni Ramon Del Rosario, because he was very honest, no? He mentioned, maganda ang infrastruktura noong martial law regime, nagkaroon tayong Cultural Center of the Philippines. Ngayon, yun ang problema natin, wala tayong roads and bridges to run all the cars around the roads. So natuwa ako, sabi ko, we can go forward with this. This can be a template onto which we can be responsible economic journalists seeing these elections through. That's why my commitment throughout this election is to provide people with the economic knowledge. Ano pa talaga ang economic platforms nila? To be honest, hindi ko pa rin alam. Dahil hindi sila talagang out there na nagsasabi ano ba talaga. Kaya kami na ang magkukumbinsi sa kanilang lumabas at magsabi. And I'm very proud to say I'm holding a forum later this week that really forced me to study and really get down to the details. What are their platforms? Ang dami niyan. Economics pa lang. Na-mention na ni Teddy Boy ang taxes, jobs, infrastructure, anti-poverty, free trade, ang daming pwede pag-usapan. And from there, we will leave it to the voters, to yourselves, to decide ano ba ang realities na nang-face ko ngayon na posibleng ito ang makatulong sa akin. Kayo na ang humusga. Pero unang-una, kailangan muna natin malaman ang economics, ang business platforms nila. And I think that is the best way that I can take business coverage forward when it comes to this political exercise. And by the way, I will be voting quite early because I'm an overseas voter. By April 9, magbubukas na siya sa Hong Kong, so that will be where I am voting. So that's just a little tidbit.
Popo, I think we suggested, and I hope maybe you can bring it up. In the US, it is normal to declare who your candidate, who will be elected, who you will appoint to the cabinet. It's not because, okay, you may be embarrassed if they turn you down, but when you give a list of your candidate nominees, you give a standard that you intend to fulfill. Whether they say no or not, you'll get someone like that. This will give us an indication of the kind of government. And so, if you could tell them that we will send out this flyer or notice, please give us your nominees for your cabinet, because if you don't, we will nominate those cabinet members for you based on what we think is your lousy moral character.
Yeah, I do a lot of political briefings for business groups, and I remember I did a briefing for the financial executives of the Philippines. And their worry was, what happens to the business situation with each candidate? And I said, why are you so worried about electing Vice President Binay? As long as Gary Teves is there, you're in good hands. And so that's what Teddy and I were talking about. We must demand from the candidates really an enumeration of their policy advisors, because those are the ones that will give us confidence down the line that the president in the end is somebody who steers government, but the one who's going to do all the hard work are the cabinet secretaries. So a president or a candidate who attracts very good people around them, very competent people, is a reflection of the character of the candidate. The other thing I think that we should do